and I would like to welcome all of you to the book launch. And I am so privileged and honored that we are here. We're learning about a very interesting topic that affects all of us. So this is going to be interesting, not for me, but also for all of us, because climate change is something that impacts every one of us in our everyday lives. So we'll start off the book launch officially, and I'd like to introduce my colleague, Nosheen, who's going to come and open.
It is very heartening to see such a healthy participation at this book launch.
So a quick introduction of the panelists. We're very honored that we have Dr. Professor Pervez Hoodboy. He's a well-known Pakistani nuclear physicist. He's an analyst. He's an essayist. Next, we have Mr. Sultan Bashir. He's also a nuclear engineer. He's worked in Pakistan Atomic Energy Commission. He was awarded with the Sitara Imtiaz, so thank you, sir, for being here. Then we have Dr. Irfan Khan, who teaches at Islamic University. He's an environmental expert. So panelists, thank you for being here. And we would like to start off with a few comments. And I'd like to give this opportunity to Mr. Dr. Professor Hoodboy.
Thank you very much. It's actually quite unusual for someone who's the villain of a piece, the villain of the book, to be asked to be present at the launching of the book. But I am here at the invitation of the author, Mr. Waqas Ahmad, and if my comments are unkind, let it be understood that it is only because the truth must be told. Let me, at the outset, say that as a scientist, I feel somewhat out of place over here at the launching of a book whose very first page tells you that this book is not to be thrown away because it contains the names of holy prophets, of holy texts, and therefore this must be respected, else you know the law of the land. It's also quite daunting to be here when there's a full chapter which is dedicated to exposing me. My profession as a scientist tells me that I must work according to the scientific method. The scientific method requires that one deal with facts. Facts that are verifiable, facts that are accessible to our senses as well as to our equipment, facts that can be independently verified by people who have very different opinions and ideas, facts that are repeatable. So, it is with some difficulty that I read this book, because this book deals largely, I would say, with matters of the faith. The very first chapter debates whether Satan is a jinn or not. Thereafter, it goes off into asking the question whether jinns can copulate with humans and produce children. The whole issue of jinns is a very fascinating one. These are creatures that are obviously not accessible to our usual senses, else we'd be seeing them all around us. And personally, I have never seen a jinn in my whole life, although I have looked for them. Of course, there are people who believe in them and believe in them very firmly, and some 30 years ago or so, with Mr. Sultan Bashiruddin Mahmud, I had a rather, I'd say, spicy interchange when he proposed that Pakistan's energy problems be solved by using jinns as a source of energy. But this is something that I'm sure he would like to talk about later, and about progress that has been made in this direction. Now let me come to climate change. Weather and climate are all about physics. If you take a drop of water, it will fall according to Newton's law of gravity. It will be resisted by frictional forces, viscous forces. Clouds are formed according to the laws of thermodynamics. This is a subject that we teach very early on in physics. So, it's all a matter of being able to write down the equations of fluid motion and then being able to solve them. And this becomes very important when we talk about the ability to predict weather. Now, let me come to the topic of this book. This book is, as you see, it's about the reality of floods in Pakistan, normative case study of weather modification, climate change, and man-made floods of 2010. At the outset, let me say that certain local alterations of weather are possible. It has been known for a very long time that if you seed clouds with silver iodide or even with ordinary salt, that if your aerosol, which is made up of either salt or of sodium iodide, is small enough, it has a particle size that is small enough, in that case, moisture can condense around it, and this leads to bigger drops. When drops get sufficiently big, then the force of gravity is able to pull them down against the viscous force. And so you have rainfall. However, there have to be very particular conditions. The size of droplets in the cloud, which has already to be formed, has to be fairly large. There have to be upcurrents, but not too fast, else the drops will be dissipated. So, cloud seeding works for localized rainfall. Sometimes, 80% of the time it doesn't work, but 10 to 15 to 20% of the time it does work. And so it is used by countries around the world, by the United States, by China, by India's experimenting with it. Pakistan also tried to experiment with it, but I don't think we got too far ahead. However, this is not the same as altering weather globally. It is very, very far from that. When we are in the realm of science, then we should stick to science and we should be able to argue in a manner that is scientific and which draws upon previous knowledge gained within that field. I have great admiration for the author, Waqas. He is a very bright young man. However, I do wish that you had studied climatology and you had studied physics before attempting a book on this. Because after all, climate change, or climate science rather, is something that draws upon a huge amount of basic physics and then advanced physics subsequently. If you don't do that, then you should not express an opinion on it. You should not write a book on it. I'm afraid I've seen you quoting various people over here, and I see that some are very reputable people, others I've never heard of, and others that I've heard of in a very negative way. People like Sarah Palin, who are considered loonies outside the pale in the United States. I also see that there is, I'm afraid, a misunderstanding on your part in the section of the book where you attack me. For example, let me turn to page 325, where you say, Parvez Hudbhai enthusiastically endorsed the statements of Dr. Nick Begich, who is one of HARP's most vocal critics, and reverently refers to him as a scientist. On the contrary, I called him a quack. I said, this man is a homeopathic doctor. He has absolutely no business. So I said, I have difficulties, and perhaps I have a very major difficulty with the central thesis of the book, which says that these were man-made floods of 2010. And so behind everything is, of course, the bad guy. The bad guy is the United States, the CIA, other bad guys too. I also noticed that China is a bad guy here for some reason as well, but let that go. The problem is that even the United States does not have the ability to manipulate weather around the world, to cause climate change. In fact, the United States presently is suffering from climate change. If you look at the state of California, it has been under a situation of drought for the last 5 years. Now tell me, if the United States had the ability to actually change the weather, then how could they not have changed the weather in favor of themselves? Also, look at the Midwest, where there has been tornado after tornado, where there have been twisters which have blown off houses. There have been forest fires in national parks. Thousands of homes have been burnt. The US too is helpless before these forces of nature, which are so much greater than anything that we puny humans can so far do. So I thank you for giving me this opportunity. As I said, I do wish you the very best, and I do hope that you will be careful in the selection of your next topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. And so for your next talk, remember, retract those statements and believe in scientific evidence.
There's a question that everybody asks me, why I must talk about climate change, especially my wife. When she heard that Parvez Hoodboy is coming, she said, "Oh, come on, he's such a scientist. He's the man of his field, and who are you? You're just a layman who wrote some random stuff in your book." So it's not random stuff. Believe me, if you remain with me for the next 45 minutes, I think your opinion is going to change. Can anyone identify when was this picture taken? This one, this flooded one. Can anyone identify? No, it's not Jalsa. It's water and people are under rain. Can you identify when it's taken?
No, it was
2010. All right. Can you identify when this picture was taken? Talking about harp is like talking about God and Satan these days. Okay, we don't talk about it. But this is Sura. Sura is another atmospheric heater, ice cap facility. Then BAE and APTI, they make artificial atmospheric mirror there. These are the things just to want to show. All right, this is the monsoon pattern. This is the precipitation pattern. So this is the water that we have to protect. All right, this is the interesting part. Evidence of secret weather modification operations. We have to go country by country. So United States of America. Ben Livingston is the guy who performed a lot in 1960 Operation Popeye. Yeah. Thanks for the patience. I had a lot more to say.
Hi there, my name is Catherine with Reuters. And I had a little difficulty following exactly the gist of what everybody was saying, so I want to see if I've got this exactly. From what I understand from your book and what you were saying, there's a CIA program to control Pakistan's weather, is that right? And there's some sort of demonic...
Please don't
link?
put that in Reuters report.
No, I'm not, I'm just curious. I mean, what is that what you're getting at here? I'm not really clear what you're getting at.
No, I don't think that's what you're getting at.
I have to answer this.
I don't really see the links here that you're laying out.
Please, we look foolish enough on the international press as it is.
Just to sum it up.
Where did you read the word CIA in the book?
With all these references.
No, you're just making it up. I don't think you can find CIA in a weather modification chapter. It was just in the first chapter, which was about spirituality and stuff like that. So there's no CIA. CIA has got nothing to do with weather modification. I'm sure about this thing. I've read it.
So who is it then, exactly?
Who wants to bring floods to Pakistan is the question.
Yes.
Okay. You don't judge the enemy by its intention. You judge the enemy by its capability. And the book says all about the capability. That's it.
No, I have a question. You say this is a case study of weather modification, climate change, and man-made floods of 2010. Which man-made
CAPEX,
floods?
Indian CAPEX program, July 2010, when we did 30 sorties inside Kashmir.
So it's the
We want to
Indians-
rectify it. We are trying to verify it.
So it's the Indians who caused the 2010 flood.
Yes.
Ah, okay.
What's the
Because
point
you
about
don't
that?
give any reference on your slides. Just hear me out.
Yeah.
I have a problem with it because I know that one of the slides was definitely wrong. Where you showed,
Which one?
I'm telling you, where you showed Madame Curie and Albert Einstein, and that was a picture from the Solvay conference. It wasn't what you said it was. And all these pictures, if there's no reference on your slides, then who knows where that's coming from?
That it is not sufficient to just collect a number of facts. The number of facts that you see over here was enormous number of things. But all of them were completely uncorrelated with each other. Completely uncorrelated with each other. In fact, what you were able to show throughout your talk was the only weather modification was through cloud seeding. There's no other weather modification, example of weather modification you could give over here. And then quoting people and quoting, like the example that this lady gave you. You know, there is this Solvay conference photograph of Einstein and other people. We just put it in without any purpose, you know.
Thank you. Could I ask each of the panelists if they agree with the basic thesis that the 2010 floods were caused by India, please?
Because I haven't read the book, I just read this presentation. From that presentation, I could convince that.
I think that flood was not caused by India. But you have read a lot of things about other dams which are now being built. Yeah. And those dams can be made to flood Pakistan also.
I think there's not a shred of evidence which supports the claim that these floods were man-made. I think it's just our incompetence that allowed these floods to be so devastating. After all, Sindh knew for days in advance that there was a flood coming because the flood had already happened in Punjab, and yet Sindh took no steps to save its people.
I value Dr. Professor Eqbal because he is somebody who will say, no, I don't agree. Because there are many people to praise you. I have written about 30 books. I have a number of patents in my name. I have contributed to your Bhuta project. I was Director General of Pushap project. Gave this country the first indigenous nuclear reactor to produce plutonium, and many more. But so there are a number of people who criticize me, and I value it, and I thank you very much.
The question?
As regards the gin, to the best of my memory, I have never said it.
Actually, you wrote a paper on it.
I don't remember it. In fact, I denied it in writing also. I don't remember it. If I wrote a paper, I would like to see that paper.
And you gave an interview to the Wall Street Journal in which you said, yes, it can be done. Because you can Google, if anyone has a smartphone here, if you could put in gins and Sultan Bashiruddin.
That's another conspiracy theory. That's another conspiracy theory which you want to. That's another conspiracy theory we can talk about later, right?
हर दिन हम 90 मिलियन टन कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड जो है वो हम इमिट कर रहे हैं और that's the reason of global warming.
I don't think that you are a scientific person. I don't think you've done scientific research. And I don't think that your book really has any validity whatsoever.
In the earlier phase of this evening, the professor over here mentioned the science discussion that you both had.
In my opinion, science is the biggest witness to God. I have worked a lot on Holy Quran and wrote 2 books on the Holy Quran and science. and I am amazed. For that I had to read the modern science also, and I had to read the Holy Quran also. And you can see my books, and when I have sent few to my good friend Pervez Hulbai also, for his comments.
I hope it did some good.
Well, I should tell you, if I may, that many of his books are about matters about the spirit, what will happen to the spirit as it will go from Alam-e-Barzakh to Alam-e-Arwah. Now, that's not science, really, because frankly, I don't think it is possible to travel with these arwah, with these ruh. And so, I would say that what Bashiruddin Sahib is doing is not really science. And so, when you ask the question, what kept you in science? I say, what science? Now, let me follow up a little bit upon what Bashiruddin Sahib had said earlier. That who knows what will happen in science because it's changing all the time. Well, actually, some things absolutely will never change. Never. Gravity is going to be gravity forever. Things will fall down, they will never go up. Entropy, which you may not be familiar with, is a quantity that will always increase for an isolated system. And unfortunately, our scientists, I don't know about him, but our scientists don't seem to know even that basic fact. And so, do you remember 2 years ago when we had the water card? You remember?
Yes, it was a water card.
And do you remember Dr. A.Q. Khan clapping? Do you remember the head of PCSIR saying, "Hum bhi aisi cheez banana chahte hain"? Do you remember those 200 so-called scientists at NUST? This man, Agha Waqar Pathan, drove his car before them and they were all clapping. So the charlatans, those who pretend to be scientists in Pakistan, are actually a disgrace to this nation. They have made fools of themselves by praising Agha Waqar Pathan and other idiots like him. So what is the science that we are talking about? Sir, you are saying that we ought to be happy that our scientists are believers. I say they are believers, but they are not scientists.
I'm sorry, I didn't get my question.
That's probably science of relativity.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, it was a very interesting discussion. We started with climate change and then we went to faith and science, which seems a very popular topic. We need to have a whole new sitting on that. But I would like to thank the audience here and panelists and Vikas here for his book. You may believe it, you may not believe it, but at least he made an effort, so we should appreciate that. Maybe his next book could be backed with more scientific evidence and you won't be bashed so much.